this might be a little bit controversial for me to say, but rehab is easy.
But until I was beaten enough, and beaten enough meant everything had to be stripped out of my life, everything had to be stripped away from me, and that was a state prison cell for me.
Why, when they are doing so well, do they self-sabotage themselves?
I've never, maybe rarely, seen someone get sober and stay sober when the condition is anything outside of themselves.
You don't got a sponsor or a home group, the chances are you're not really, you ain't doing that great.
You let your fear of me dying perpetuate my use.
Hi, I'm Tony, and I'm an alcoholic and an addict, and I have a sobriety date of January of 2020, January 15th, 2020. I've been sober a little over 4.5 years, and I'm 41 years old. And my journey started when I was 20 years old, and I was introduced for the first time to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. And my journey has been one that has been long. It has been a blessing. It has been a curse. It has been everything that has been in between for myself and my family included. And I got sober in a state prison cell in January of 2020, and for the previous 16 years, I was in and out of every treatment center, every state, every sober community that you can imagine across the country, trying to understand and trying to get this program that they say is simple for somebody who's complicated like myself. And my family, my brother, I have a mom and dad and a brother in my immediate family, and they've been with me the entire journey, through the ups, through the downs, through staying sober for a little bit, through going back out, to committing more felonies, to ending up in state prison where I met a lifer and spent the last 8 months in a medium security prison cell with him. And he's the one that changed my life. And if you ever hear my story, you can find out how that was and how that came to be about. And I guess what was remarkable about my journey was that all of the treatment centers, all of the recovery houses, all of the places that my parents were so gracious to help me get to try to get sober, they didn't end up being the answer, but they were phenomenal learning tools for me to understand why I ended up where I was on that date when I got sober in state prison and spent 8 months with a guy who was never getting out. And after he shared his story with me, and I shared where my story with him, we became pretty good friends. And I was released 2 years later, and have found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to become the biggest part of my life that it is, and the biggest part of my family's life. And my journey was not pretty. It was not perfect. It was not handwritten, but it was my journey. And what brings me to this podcast called Ask the Addict is this is a place where family members who have loved ones who have been struggling can ask the disease itself, because I am an alcoholic and I have the disease of addiction. And this is just a place where I would love to, if I could help one family member understand or deal with their loved one who is struggling right now, and make a difference in their life, then that is why I'm here. And that's why I would love to share my story and my thoughts with any family member who has somebody going through this disease that I've went through firsthand. And that's why I'm here. So.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tony, so much. So my name's Mace Cooper Drew, and I work as a clinician. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I work as a clinician at Steps to Recovery, which is one of the leading recovery and mental health addiction treatment centers in Pennsylvania. So Matt also works there with me, and one of the things that Steps to Recovery offers is a free family virtual support group that is open to anyone who is struggling with trying to support someone with an addiction. So it's a safe space to come and get some support and education. And how this podcast got started is Tony's mom and dad have been a part of that support group for, gosh, I'm going to say almost 2 years. And Tony was on there a couple times, and Tony approached me and said, hey, let's do, what do you think about doing a podcast, something with Ask the Addict? And I just thought it was a great idea. And, I'm a family member of somebody in long-term recovery, but this is what I know. And I'm going to get a little geeky on you every once in a while. And here's one of those moments. There's over 23 million persons in the United States struggling with an addiction. Of those 23 million, approximately, give or take, 5 family members, 5 individuals close to them are impacted. If you do the math on that, that's over 100 million people who are impacted by someone's addiction. A very few, very small amount of them will find their way into a support group, find their way into their own recovery, find their way for many reasons. And so we want to put this out there on the internet, out in cyberspace, for those families, for those friends who need support in helping a loved one, a family member, or even professionals that need help supporting the addict. And there's a lot of questions out there, and the questions that we're going to bring to you, Tony and Matt, the questions that I'm going to bring to you are real questions from the families that we serve on our family virtual support group. So these are not made up questions. These are questions that people are really struggling with and want answers to. So thank you both so much for just taking the time to do this. I'm so excited about this. It's awesome. Matt, go ahead and introduce
Thanks,
yours.
Mace. Thank you, Tony. Always a pleasure to connect with you guys. I think, this trio is such a powerful group because of the collective experiences that we have. I mean, Mace, you have an extensive history working in counseling and treatment, and also, the mother of someone in long-term recovery. So you have that realm kind of covered. Tony, you have, 20-year history with drugs and alcohol, and I'm kind of right there in the middle where I have a little bit of professional experience, a little bit of personal experience, and it's kind of like this awesome Venn diagram where I think we can really come together and provide some valuable information. But my name's Matt. I'm an alcoholic. My sober date is March 14th, 2021. I have a little over 3 years sober, and I'm also a drug and alcohol counselor at Steps to Recovery. And it's really a blessing to be where I'm at today. I was a little over 3 years ago, pretty misguided. I didn't know what direction I wanted my life to take. I just knew that I probably didn't want it to go on much longer. And I ended up getting sober, and it was probably the greatest blessing in disguise that ever happened to me. It really changed the direction that I wanted to lead. It took me from being a pretty selfish individual to wanting to reach out and help others and kind of get outside myself. And that also helps me stay sober. It gives me a purpose. And that's how I've gotten to meet these two people also. And it's funny how life has a way of doing that. But I remember when I got sober, the stigma was such a big thing for me. It was going into rehab, and I had every reason in the book why I couldn't be an alcoholic. My age, my socioeconomic background, my education, the lack of trauma, 2 parents, what you name it. And I went into rehab very much me versus them. And I came out of rehab realizing that we're all the same, and mental health and addiction are slowly kind of turning a corner in society. I think people are recognizing it more as the disease that it is. They're giving it a little bit more caution, and the resources are becoming more and more, but there's still really not enough, especially in the family space. I think there's rehabs and treatment centers everywhere, but like what I've really learned from doing the family programming is, like Mace just talked about, addiction is it's almost the other side of the same coin when it comes to families. The doubts, the fears, the insecurities, the denial, the enabling, like everything that happens, and all the worries that a parent or a spouse or a loved one might have, are mirrored in the addict and alcoholic. And I think it's really important to recognize that. And I'm really happy that we can come together and kind of answer some of these questions. And Mace, I'm going to kick it back to you to lob
Okay.
some fastballs at us.
All right. Thanks. Listen, we don't have we didn't put a time limit on this, but can we all agree we're not going to solve?
We're not?
We're not. I wish we could. We're probably just going to, touch the tip of the iceberg because we could just talk on and on for hours and hours and hours. So if it's okay with you two, I want to start with relapse. Because right now in our family group, our family support group, how people find their way there is if they have a family member initially who's in one of our treatment facilities. So we've got residential, we got IOP, we've got partial. And so that's how they find their way there. And I say that because most folks start with their loved one entering treatment. But what's happening recently is we have a lot of folks who have relapsed. And the question that has come up, and here is the question unfiltered. I'm going to give you first the unfiltered question. Why, when they are doing so well, do they self-sabotage themselves? So I have a partner, a girlfriend, her boyfriend gets out of Silver Pines. He's relapsing. She wants to know why, when he was doing so well, is he self-sabotaging himself?
Well, that's a loaded question, and so I know, for me, there were, like I said in my introduction, I spent almost a little bit under 20 years, from the 17 years coming in and out of recovery. And every time that I would go to treatment and the family would find out that I wasn't doing well, or he was drinking, or he was getting high, or whatever the case was, I knew that in order for me to get back some of the things that I liked from my family, which a lot of times for me was support money wise, whether it was trying to convince mom, dad, girlfriend at the time, my brother, whatever the case was, that what, okay, I'm gonna quit, I'm gonna go in here. But when I went in that treatment center, in that recovery house, I wasn't going in with the intention of staying and changing my life. I was going in with the intention of just pleasing the people closest to me so that I could fool them into getting my car back or getting my allowance back that was coming from my family, or getting my job back. Job and girlfriend are two big things for young men, especially that, your girlfriend threatens you, say, if you do this one more time, I'm leaving you. I am not putting up with this. And you go right back into treatment. And I can tell you any story that I want to while I'm in the treatment. I can dress everything up. I can tell you I got a sponsor. I'm going to meetings every day. That's exactly what I did for so many years. But until I was beaten enough, and beaten enough meant everything had to be stripped out of my life. Everything had to be stripped away for me, and that was a state prison cell for me. In order for me to realize that unless I really change my life for myself and do the things that the program the last 16 years was trying to tell me to do, there was no way that I was going to stay on the course. You know, I can fool mom and dad again and again, or brother and sister or girlfriend. I can fool them anytime I want to. And I think until, to answer the question, the family member, the reason that they're going in there, they're not going in there to actually change. They're going in there for somebody else or for another reason that is temporary, not long term. And I know I remember doing that on many days and many times for myself, you know?
And I'm going to let you respond, but I want to make sure I'm understanding what Tony's saying. And so I'm going to almost like reframe it. So what you're saying is, so the question is, why, when they are doing so well, do they self-sabotage themselves? What I'm hearing you saying is, hey, girlfriend, I wasn't really doing so well.
Exactly.
It looked like I was doing
Yes.
because I was going through all the motions,
Right.
but in reality, I really wasn't doing so well. So I have a follow-up question to that, but I'm going to let Matt go, because as a family member, and you can be thinking about this, Tony, I hope it doesn't throw off your response, Matt. But of course, as a family member, then my response is then, how the HE then are we supposed to know when you are really doing well? But Matt, you go ahead and to the original question. And
Yeah, I could give you 25 different reasons for why they might do it. I think Tony made a great point. I've never, maybe rarely, seen someone get sober and stay sober when the condition is anything outside of themselves. Um, I got sober for my parents, I got sober for my girlfriend, my wife, my kids. Um, that condition is always eventually going to become secondary to a drink or a drug, because that's what the disease is. It tells us that it's the most important thing that there is. It's the solution to all of our problems, and we will never get away from it. And you'll always let that person or thing down. But outside of that, I think ego plays a big part. You get a couple months under your belt, you start feeling good, you forget how bad things can get. Your ego takes over. You say, oh, especially depending on what your drink or drug is. Most people can usually accept that like heroin's not a recreational drug, right? Like no one is like, oh, I can successfully manage my heroin use. But especially when it comes to things like weed or alcohol or Adderall, um, hey, I've been sober 60, 90 days. Now I think I can drink like a normal person again. I can go out and have a cocktail, whatever that is. Um, and the other thing I would say is, especially I think people, a lot of the clients or individuals that I see consistently relapsing over and over again are typically skewed younger. And I think a lot of that has to do with the failure to launch kind of syndrome, where they just don't have the life skills. And like this might be a little bit controversial for me to say, but rehab is easy. Like rehab is the easiest thing that you're ever going to do in sobriety. They cook you meals, they clean like the bathrooms and the common areas for you. They tell you what to do. You get to go to sleep in a bed every single night. It's like adult summer camp for addicts and alcoholics sometimes, depending on the rehab you go to. And then extended versions of treatment are kind of like that. And when so many times I see people doing great in treatment and then they get the, hey, just so you know, you're discharging next week. Like, what's the plan? They immediately go out and relapse because they don't know what the plan is. They don't know how to live independently without supervision, without rules dictating like how they can and can't live their life. And it's easy to be in that environment, hanging out. It's like hanging out with your friends in college, kind of like all the time. And
yeah,
that's not saying that there's not a lot of work to be done when you're in those places, but it's a lot more comfortable to fall back onto what you know and what you're used to, as opposed to taking that risk and, okay, now I got to go get a more adult job. Now I got to go get an apartment and take care of it and pay, utilities and all these types of things, where that might be a little bit easier, just kind of knowing you can fall right back into treatment.
so I have like like about 5 more questions just around this, but I want to go back to something that Tony, you said. Um, and in it, I think I heard you say, and it could just be me, but that concept of, and Matt, you kind of said it too, when you said that if they're doing it, when the condition is anything outside of themselves. So what I want to ask both of you then is, what is your view then on that hitting rock bottom? Because I'm involved. And again, we talk a lot about, parents. I'm a parent of somebody in long-term recovery. Tony, it's your parents. Matt, it's, your parents, but we got spouses too, and partners and girlfriends and so what do we do then? Are you saying just let them hit rock bottom? Because then when they hit rock bottom, then it's got to be for themselves.
So in my in my experience, it's not about you letting them hit rock bottom. This is what I can tell you about using alcohol and drugs and being in that lifestyle. Whether you help me, my parents have a sufficient amount of funds probably to help me long after I was ever dead. Okay. Now let me put that out there, and I'm gonna tell you why I'm putting that out there for a reason. I'm putting that out there for a reason is because they're all the help that they gave me, right? All the Betty Fords and the Williamsburg places. These are 30,000. There was a guy in one of my treatment centers. His last name was. I didn't know he was Chris, heir of the. Okay, when I was younger, right? Those are the kind of treatment centers that I was going to. So all the help that you can give me, if I continue in the life of alcohol and drugs, I'm going to meet my bottom at some point. It's inevitable to happen. What the prayer and the hope and prayer on a daily basis is that it's not 6 feet under, because after that, there's no more chances. But if you're still living and breathing, and there is more chances, and you do relapse, like people's loved ones, do at many times. One of the things that they've got to realize is that their job and my parents' job, I guess, during that time was when I was done ripping and running and doing what I was doing, they were the same people as they were on time 15 than they were on time 1. What changed is that they became more educated when I came into sobriety. Okay, Tony, so this time we want to hear a little bit more about the meetings that you're going to, the sponsor that you have. Every time I came back in, it seemed like they knew a little bit more. When they were in the black, so to say, they were in the dark. I could come in and I could say, "Yep, I'm at the sober house. Yep, everything's good. Yep, everything's great. Doing good. Yep, start work tomorrow. Yep, okay, all right, bye." Now that was time 2 that I was in the sober house. Some 15 years later, the conversations changed to, "So Tony, do you have a sponsor yet? So Tony, do you have a?" They started to ask me questions that, I was like, God, they know what this really takes. So I couldn't muffle I couldn't hide the doing good, but really not doing good anymore is the question. They became more educated in the questions to ask once I was sober versus the questions that they asked when they didn't really know a lot about this disease. And that gets back more into my why I'm here is I want to tell the family members, guys, what kind of questions can you be asking your loved one to get a better idea of, I wonder how they're really doing. Yeah, but how are you really doing? The surface questions are great. I can help you ask more questions to dig a little deeper to really get a sense of, you know what? They don't even have a sponsor. You don't got a sponsor or a home group. The chances are you're not really, you ain't doing that great. So it's not going to stop their fall, but what it's going to do is it's going to prepare you for what's coming next instead of being like, oh my God, they used. Oh my God, I thought they were doing so well. No, they weren't. They never were. That's my hope. you know?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there's times where I find, because I do family recovery coaching, and there's times when I'm coaching a family member and they're working harder than the person who's in, struggling with the addiction. It's like something's not right with this picture when you find yourself working harder than the person who's struggling with the addiction. But something I loved that you said was, and I know your mom and dad, and they are just awesome people. And when you said, like, they were the same people. And this journey, if you want to be, raw with it, it takes family members to places where we get ashamed that we went there. There's family members that, man, we don't want, we on that family call, we have families that say, when your mom and dad share their story, who say, I'm not doing this for 15 years. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, and what I hope, what we're hearing, here's one of my whys, and I think it's for both you and Matt, is we want to shorten it so that it's not 15 years. Because if your mom and dad knew what they knew in 15 years, if they knew it at year two, it might have shortened, might not have been 15 years, because there are things we can do to contribute recovery. There's things that we do that contribute to the ongoing chaos of an addiction. Absolutely. We don't cause it, but there's definitely things we do that contribute to it. And there's things we can contribute to recovery. So, Matt, I'm going to toss it
So
to you.
I had this before I make my point to illustrate kind of how this can affect your entire family. Literally on Saturday, so 2 days ago, I'm out with my family, celebrating my sister's birthday. I was, didn't sleep great the night before. I was, out in the sun all morning. So I showed up, I was pretty tired. And when I'm tired, I get a little bit more like in my head, a little bit more introverted. I get in the car to go home and my mom calls me and she says, are you okay? Like, is everything okay? Like you seemed, kind of sad or like not right. And like my first thought was like, obviously I'm okay. Like, or like, how dare you question me on this, right? Like, I'm fine. I'm, 3.25 years sober. And then like I thought about it for a second and I was like, and then I said, I'm fine, but thank you for asking because all the times that I told her that I was fine and I wasn't, that's still in her mind. And how is she going to know that I'm fine when I'm telling her I'm fine when I've lied about it so many times before? And like that's how that can just stick with people. Like I have cause like I can sit here and tell you like I never stole from my mom or I never did X, Y, or Z, but like there's a little bit of trauma there. Like that still sits in the back of her mind. Um but just to get back to the original point, I think rock bottom looks a little bit differently for everybody. There's kind of a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual rock bottom. Personally, I kind of think that like the spiritual rock bottom is really like the rock bottom. Um, because some people might be okay losing their house and being homeless. Other people might not. But like really what it is like my back is against this wall and it can't go any farther. And if I want to get out of this corner, I have to make a change. And like the hardest thing in working with families is telling them stop enabling your kid. Like, I know if you don't give your kid money, they're going to be homeless. I know maybe they're going to have to go to a state-run rehab facility, or I know they might be like out there getting high for a few more months. And like, no, I don't want to be the one to tell someone that because God forbid something happens, then it's, oh, Matt told me to do this, and now my kid is, fill in the blank there. But enabling provides a safety net that whether you're conscious or unconsciously aware of it, it's I can move back a little bit further in this corner. I still got room to go. It's, if I get high right now, mom and dad, they're still gonna send me to go hang out with in rehab, something like that, where it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's been very clear to me, like no one is going to help me. I don't have any way to get out of this doing what I'm currently doing, and I have nothing else to do, and I can't fathom feeling this way anymore. Like I think that's what really inspires a change. And the difference to me between recovery and staying sober is recovery is the mindset of my life is better without XYZ in it. Therefore, I have no interest in picking up a drink or a drug versus staying sober or like a dry drunk is every single day I'm scratching and crawling my way to make it through that day, fighting the urge to take a drink because I still think that it's something that I want in my life.
Wow. Wow. Matt, you mentioned the concept of um, the failure to launch earlier on. And we do see a lot of young folks coming into treatment and parents, stepping right in. And, as a parent, I hated that word enabler. I'm like, I'm trying to help, and because I'm trying to help, I get labeled as an enabler. Like, come on, how that's like that's that's unfair. Um, but one of the things that my son said to me when I asked him, what did I do that helped and what did I do that hurt? And he always would say, he's like, Mom, the thing you did that was not helpful is you let your fear of me dying perpetuate my use. And when he said that, it was like, man, a shock to my heart, but it was true. Like and maybe if it wasn't just that fear of him dying, but it was the fear of him having a criminal record, the fear of him not graduating college, the fear of him getting fired from his job. Like it was just, it was a, layers of fears that I had that perpetuated his use, kept bailing him out. And so what did I want to ask? I guess what I want to ask is, how do you know when to pull away and when to say no? Our beloved Eddie Quinn used to always say, he used to do the family program with me, and he used to say, do you love them enough to say no? He's, and when do you say no?
I think you have to be able to step outside of kind of yourself and the emotions in the situation and view it almost from, 10,000 feet up and say, okay, like, am I objectively helping this person or what I'm doing actually kind of detrimental? Like, here's the pattern that they've exhibited every time I help them, they continue to do this. Um, and it's almost like the idea of like, if the same thing doesn't work, try something else. Because what's different at the end of the day? If you're going to do the same thing over and over again, there's probably not a whole lot of change going on there. Maybe something needs to give. Um, it's really hard to make decisions based on emotion, make correct decisions. So the best, like, talk about it with other people, get feedback, whether you're coming to this family group or talking to your poker buddies or like whatever it is. Um, say like, hey, how would you handle this situation if you were me? Because oftentimes people can see your situation a lot clearer than you can.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna tell a little story, and it's about my dad, and I relate it to my recovery today, and I'll answer the question as simply as I can by explaining it. So when my dad became vice president of a university in Virginia, and it was his first time being vice president, and he went to the president's office because there was a hurricane that was supposed to be coming to the area that we were living in at the time. And he, one of the jobs of a vice president of a university is to inform the president of anything pressing that will have to do with the student body at any time, or that will have to do with the university, whether it's the university shutting down, a major emergency, whatever. It's the vice president's job to get that info and get that news going first to his ear before he hears it from the public and has to deal with it that way. So knowing that this hurricane was coming, right? And it was supposed to shut down. It was supposed to be a Category 4 hurricane. And the last thing that this university president, he hated closing the schools on snow days. He never closed the school for anything. So my dad rushed into his office and he said, her secretary was in the office, and the secretary told him, "Rod, is everything okay?" And, sorry, said, "Rod, is everything okay?" And he said, I gotta talk to Gene right now. Well, he's in a meeting with donors right now. Well, donors, people that give millions of dollars to university. And she said, "I can pull him out." She said, "Pull him out." So she went in, he pulled, the president came out of the meeting and said, "Rod, what's going on?" And my dad said, "Gene, I couldn't get sleep last night. I mean, I heard about this hurricane that's coming. I think that we might have to shut the school down on this one. I know you don't like to close the school." And he said, "Rod, is there a school shooter on top of the student center with an AK-47 right now?" And he looked at my dad, and my dad said, "No." And he said, "Everything else we will talk about and we will take care of." He said, "Unless there's a school shooter on the building, an active shooter right now, you don't pull me out of a meeting with donors who are giving the university hundreds of millions of dollars." Okay? My dad said he learned a valuable lesson on that day. And for me, the school shooter on top of the building is a chemical, alcohol, or drugs. So to answer the question to, the people, as long as if they're sober, the conversation can continue on, if that makes sense. The minute that that they believe that they're high, or they know that they're high, the no's have to be firm and the boundaries have to be set at that point. We can talk about you moving back in the house. We can talk about you getting your car back. We can talk about you staying here for 6 months. But we can't have any of those conversations unless you're sober. If you're sober, then we can discuss anything from that point. The line of sobriety has to be the boundary. And then, but Tony, how do we know if they're sober or not? We can get in. That's a topic for another day. We can get into that when you're ready.
Okay. So it brings to, let's go there just for a minute, because we're talking about relapse. So what happens is, and here's a question that families have, why do you go back to using after you promised you'd stop? So you went in for help, you went into a treatment facility, you come out, and it doesn't, you might go to a couple meetings, you might go to a couple, go to your therapist a little bit, but then, it seems like you're not drinking or using, and then all of a sudden less meetings, less going to, the IOP, the, outpatient program. But hey, at the end of the day, you told me, you promised me you were going to stop, and then you start again. And I just can't, as a family member, and we get this question a lot. It's really hard for me to wrap my head around, because if you really loved me, you would just stop. You would keep your promise.
It's really tough because it kind of comes back to that internal versus external motivation. Like if I'm sitting in a bar, someone leaves a drink in front of me, I had a bad day, maybe I haven't hit a meeting in a while, and I look at that drink for an extra second, the first thought going through my mind isn't, "But I promised my mom." It's, "Damn, that drink looks pretty good right now." And before I know it, I might pick it up and drink it, and then it's off to the races from there, and I don't know where the race ends. Um, but you know, it's not personal, I wouldn't say. Like, don't take it personally that this person promised you they're not going to drink or use drugs again. And then it's, why would they offend me like this? Because it's not that's not the thought process. It's, that's so far in the back of the mind, um, when like a relapse occurs. And that's why, I think it has to be an internal process. If you're doing it for other people, um, that's why you see a lot of people that might not be super serious about their recovery that, hey, we got a 4-day weekend. Nobody's going to drug test me in treatment for the next 4 days. I guess I can drink tonight. Or, hey, my house manager's getting high. I guess I can get high too. Like all those things. That's, am I staying sober because I think that I can't get away with getting high? Or am I staying sober because I want to stay sober? And like, the distinction there is really night and day for like what the outcome's going to be, I think.
Mm, wow. Tony, did you want to
No,
comment
he,
on
no,
that?
he. I love that. I ditto. I second everything he said. Absolutely. Yes.
So a follow-up to that question then is, don't you see what you're doing to me? Like,
Mhm.
and Tony, I don't know for your parents if you saw, if they were upset, anxious, but I know we have, and Matt, I don't know how your parents were, but I know that on our family call, man, the impact that their loved ones relapse has on them, the worry and the anger, um, is just it, it it's heartbreaking. And they want to know, like, do you see what you're doing to your family members?
Uh, Absolutely. You absolutely see it. But there are, the way that, I was brought through the book, there are 12 steps that help us in that process when we get to that point. And it's the ninth step. It helps us, when the time comes, make amends for the things that we did to family, friends, coworkers, loved ones. But here's the thing. As long as keep shoving the chemical back, whether I'm going to treatment for 30 days, getting out, going to the sober house for 2 months after that, and then I keep shoving chemicals down my body. I don't care how I'm making you feel. That's part of the reason that I'm shoving the chemicals continuously over and over again down my body. Because unless I stay stopped long enough and are able to work with somebody, and that somebody for me is a sponsor, and get to the point as to where, you know what, this is what I did to mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, but you know what? I can talk to somebody else who did the same thing and it's okay. You know how I'm okay? Because this is what we do in that matter. We sit down with them, we man up or woman up, and we make amends in that process. And how they deal with that and how they react to that, it's totally up to them. I'm cleaning my side of the street. That's step work. That comes along in the process. But every time I put the chemical back in my body, I don't care. I don't care how you feel, because and it's that little cycle that we talked about before. As I'll just go get better again for a little bit, and then the selfish part of the disease takes over again. I just did step work today with a sponsee that I have, and we did step one, and I was explaining to him, this is the most important step that you'll do, because this is the step that keeps the first drink or drug out of your hand. See, if this program was easy for alcoholics and addicts like me, there would be many, that number that you said earlier, Mace, of people that needed help, there would be many people with decades and not days sober. Instead, there are many people with days sober and not decades. Why is that? Because as Matt said earlier, it's easy to walk into a treatment center. It's easy to walk into when I've lost all my shit and all my stuff and mom and dad ain't talking to me. I can walk in there and get well for 30 days. How do I stay well? How does that happen? It happens with continuous, I'm out to 4.5 years sober now. The first question my parents still ask me, Tony, how is your sobriety doing? And do you guys know how that feels? They don't ask me how much money I'm making at my job. They don't ask me how the girlfriend's doing. They don't ask me about anything else except, Tony, how are you still sober today? How is that going? We want to know what you're doing. Oh, you got the session with Mason on Monday night? That's great. Chances are, if I'm doing this podcast, I'm not high. I'm not going to get high and do this podcast. I'm not going to be here, y'all. You understand what I'm saying? So it's about checking up and following through after that treatment center and after that time that they get out of the sober houses and the recovery houses up. Because, guys, this thing is never going away. I'm going to be an alcoholic and addict until the day I die. Till I draw my last breath. If I have family members that are like, yo, are you still sober? Okay, well, cool, man. How's the job going? That's the difference. And that feels so good to an alcoholic and addict to have loved ones who know that if I don't put this first, I'm going to die. If y'all don't put this first, it's not going to be a good reminder for me of why I'm really here. You know?
Wow.
I agree with everything that Tony said. However, I will also add to the original question of, are you aware or do you just not care about what you do to people? To be honest, I wasn't entirely aware. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And I've been to treatment one time, so maybe my perspective is a little bit different. But to be honest, I didn't entirely know what I put my family through until I started talking to other families and seeing what their loved ones were putting them through. And that's why I love working with families so much, is because it puts my personal experience into perspective. And when I have those stories about my mom asking me if I'm okay, on a random Saturday, or when I make like an innocuous lie to my dad just because I don't feel like telling him something, and he says, "Oh, we're starting with the lying again." To me, that's just like a little white lie. To him, that's a callback to like, when I was telling him like these grandiose things that I'm doing in order to get money from him to pay my rent so I can continue drinking. Um, and yeah, I don't think, especially as a kid and a younger adult, I got sober when I was 25, and a lot of the people that we're talking about right now are, between the 18 to 26 demographic. Um, they don't have the full adult perspective of completely realizing that their parents are just people that have kids. Um, and when I look at my parents, it's so easy to say they have all the answers, or they, know what to do when I don't, or they don't worry the way that I worry. But like, I didn't see all the times that my mom's sitting there crying or praying or talking to people or asking for help or worrying about me, because like, I don't worry about myself that much. Like, I just am, I do the things that I do. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But I can't imagine caring for someone so much that every single thing that they do, you are worried or hopeful about the outcome. And that just never really crossed my mind. Like, addicts and alcoholics are inherently selfish people. Especially when I'm getting drunk, I don't really think about anyone else or what I'm doing to them. I think about where my next drink is coming from, how I can get what I need, and, how did my life get this way? That's really all I think about. It's not what did I do to this person? How do I make amends to this person? It's just really, I'm in my own head. Nothing else matters. And it takes time to get that perspective, I think. And, I don't even think I'm fully there yet, but I'm closer than I was before.
Wow. Well, I think this is a good space to start wrapping up. And how I'd like to wrap up is if you could each give our listeners a couple of suggestions. Just if you were to kind of like, pull everything together that we've been talking about related to relapse, just, one or two suggestions, because we want to help. We want to be a help that helps and not a help that hurts. And what I wanted all to the listeners is that, one size doesn't fit all. And so, the suggestions we're giving, if they don't resonate with you, just leave them. Hope you got something out of this podcast. Um, even if there's like just a couple things, even if there's just one thing that you got out of it that, shed some light on this dark journey that we go on with our struggling loved one, then for me, mission accomplished. So again, any of these suggestions don't resonate with you, please just leave them here. And we just thank you and appreciate you. And we're here to be a support to you on this journey, and a space where you can come and ask the addict, okay? Get some understanding. So who wants to go first? Couple suggestions.
Yeah, I'll wrap up. With first of all, I love this. I love this session, and I love all you family members out there. You guys help me so much. Relapse is a part of recovery, but it's not a necessary part. That's what I was told when I came in, and um, you know, until your loved one is fully and completely ready to change everything in their life, your only job and the way that you can be there for them most is when they are ready to get sober, you are ready to love them, welcome them, and treat them as if they were a cancer patient and not the person who took a $20 bill out of your wallet. Because this is a disease. You know, I'm all for, if they're putting the chemical in their body, all bets are off. And I want to reiterate that. But if the chemical's not going in their body and they've come to that point as to where, listen, mom, dad, brother, sister, I need help, and I'm willing to do whatever you guys suggest, you have to keep your fingers crossed that this is the time that it's going to click for them and they're going to stay sober for a long period of time. Because, none of us know when that time is. My parents and my family surely didn't know that it was going to take what it took in order to get me to be a part of my own journey as I have been this time. But they were there, but they were also there on many times when it wasn't. And the hope is that this is the time. The hope is that this one is going to be the one that sticks. And we do the best we can with what we got, but relapse is definitely part of this, but it doesn't have to be necessary, for sure. So I love you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate something you said earlier, Mace, which is don't work harder than they are. Um, because you are going to drive yourself into the ground, and that kind of couples with my second point of do not forget to take care of yourself. It's so easy to get absorbed into other people's problems, trying to save other people, worrying about them all the time, that you can start to neglect your own physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, or even neglect other people that might need you. There's cases that you have two kids, one's an addict, one's not. All of your focus is going on the one kid, and then the other kid's saying, "Hey, remember me? I'm over here." And that doesn't feel great for them either. And don't forget to enjoy your life a little bit, because you can't help anyone if you're not in a position to. And for you to be in a position to, you have to be able to show up, like Tony said, and you have to really be your best. And, it's not worth throwing 4 people's lives away at the expense of one. So that's kind of my words of caution.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you both. This has been awesome. I want to read a quote from Brene Brown. She says, "One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide."
Yeah,
So
I like that.
Love that.
that quote's one of my favorite quotes. That's what I feel like we're all doing here. And I also want to thank our families on the family support group. Matt, I don't know if you're able to put in the Zoom and the ID because it is open to the community. Anyone can come, but I do want to thank our families for bringing their questions to us, and really appreciate their honesty and vulnerability.
When this video gets 100,000 views, you're gonna regret putting that Zoom link in the video.
Uh-oh. All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. This was
Always
awesome.
great. Thank you guys.